Linda? Who's introducing? Basia is not here today.
Right, Linda, are you going to introduce today?
You did, sorry, just go ahead.
Okay, well then this morning I have the great delight and honor to once again welcome back Leah Friedman. Leah, we every week look forward to you. Every week you are so generously giving of your time and your energy and all your wisdom, and we look forward to it today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So, hi everyone. It's as always a great privilege to be back with you, especially today, Tuesday, and to be delving into this journey, to continue our journey, which we started together quite a while ago. And Baruch Hashem, we've really done a long way. In the book itself, we're only about halfway through, but Baruch Hashem, we've learned quite a few ideas, which I think are very transformational and very deep. So let's just recap where we ended off last week. Last week, we spoke about how the princess tells the viceroy he has to choose for himself a place, stay there for a full year. And what does he have to do in that year? He has to yearn to free her. He has to the whole time, in all his unoccupied time, focus on freeing her and wanting to see her back with her father on that reunion. That has to be in his mind the whole time. And he also has to fast sometimes. And on the last day, he has to not eat and not sleep. And that's how he's going to free her. And we can just imagine the viceroy. He's now been there for almost a full year. And today, we're going to hear what happens next. So let's just set our intention of this class is ready to understand what happened when the viceroy was just like a couple of hours away. If you think of a whole year, how much time is a whole year? And he's a couple of hours away from freeing the princess. And then something happens. What happens and how is that practical in our lives? And what lesson can we take from here in our Avodas Hashem? So basically, what happens is the viceroy is there for a full year and he does what the princess says. And on the last day, he doesn't eat and he doesn't sleep. And then he sets off for the palace. And on the way, he sees a beautiful tree, a tree with beautiful apples. And he stops and looks at the apples and he eats an apple and he falls into a deep slumber. Now, it's quite a disappointing twist in the story, right? That we can just imagine the viceroy, a full year, really meditating on these ideas, lots of personal prayer, connecting to his essence, finding that point of stability, that makom we spoke about, that point that he knows what he's living for, he knows what he's here in the world to do. And he's been working on this for a full year, days, weeks, months. So much as time has gone by and he's been so focused on this. And the last night arrives and, he sits awake the whole night and slowly the sun starts rising and the day begins. And we can just imagine, he's obviously also quite proud of himself, Well, listen, I've done this incredible task, a full year, I've stayed in this place, I've worked on myself, he has a sense of spiritual satisfaction maybe. And he feels, okay, now I'm in a different place. I'm ready to free her. I've almost freed her already, in actual fact. It's a few hours, a small walk away. And then he starts off on his journey. And on the way, he sees a tree with beautiful apples. And he stops to look at the apples. And what happens? What happens when he stops to look at these apples? And what was really wrong with him stopping to look at the apples? Because the princess said, the viceroy, he doesn't have to not look at the food. He can't eat, but he shouldn't say don't look at food. So really what happened, how did this happen that looking at the apples led him to this really grave mistake, which has consequences? So basically, what happens is the viceroy is on his journey and really his thoughts should have been somewhere else. If his thoughts, the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh says that a person is where their thoughts are. If his thoughts were continuously on freeing the princess, and he was imagining the whole journey, that moment of, reunion, the king embracing the princess. So you maybe wouldn't even have noticed the apples. He would have been so focused on his task, what he was actually here to do. What is this whole story about? But what happens? he stops on the way and he sees this tree with beautiful apples, and his eyes desires it. And it says there that it was very desirable in his eyes. And the Breslovim Mashpim teach that the Lashon, the language that Reb Nachman uses here, is very similar to the language that is used when they discuss when we learn about Chava in Gan Eden, who eats from the Eitz Hadas, the tree of knowledge. And what happened there? It was also very desirable in her eyes. And Chazal teach us that the eyes really are the agent of the body to sin, because the eyes see something, and the heart desires it, and then the body performs whatever chas v'sholom the transgression. So what happened here? His eyes were not in his place. If he was really focused and he was so secure in that place of who he is and what he's doing, and he's setting out with his mission the whole time. Now, remember, we discussed the whole idea that, his mission was he had to free the princess, and he couldn't do this physically. It was about achieving that place of being able to be in touch with the spirit of the princess, and then, within that spirit, being able to redirect it back to a place of kedusha and holiness. And really what happened is, in a moment of just like sheer folly, something overcomes him. He forgets who he is and what he's aiming to do and what his whole purpose in life is. And what happens? He eats from the tree. He forgets everything. Everything just goes. And we learn from here something very important, that a person can never really be sure of themselves. No matter how hard we've worked on something and we think we've overcome all that temptation, all those desires, and we think to ourselves, that's past me. I'm not on that level anymore. I'm a higher level. I'm frummer. I'm stricter. There's no such thing. Chazal say, Al tamin ba'atzmecha ad yom moso. You can't believe in yourself until the day of death. And why is this? Because Rabbi Nachman teaches that a person has desires in this world. And, whatever we do, we may think that we're very strong, but there's always that Yetzer Hara lurking in the shadows, waiting for that moment. And when does it happen? The moment when the Yetzer Hara is the strongest and he gathers every last bit of strength is when we are about to achieve something really, really great in holiness. And what happens is, as Rabbi Nachman teaches, he says, it's basically when a person's at a spiritual plateau and they're about to enter a new door, and they have to get through this door. And the Yetzer Hara is coming, and he's going to do everything he can, utilize any tiny ability to try and get the person, prevent him from entering the door. In our story, what happened, you can imagine the voice in the viceroy's head saying, wow, look how beautiful these apples are. Just stop, look at the apples. What's wrong in looking at the apples? The princess didn't tell you can't look at the apples. It's just a small thing. And the Yetzer Hara comes, and sometimes he's not going to go for the big, the big prize. He's going to try and convince us to just, maybe just say one little word of Lashon Hara. It's not really anything bad. You're just saying something about someone else or whatever it is. And the next day it gets a bit worse and a bit worse. And a person can, chas v'sholom, actually lead to a place of idolatry. Because, the Yetzer Hara he's going to try and tell a person to do like a big sin. You're going to say, no ways, that's below me, I won't do that. But when he starts on small things, so it's easy for a person to really fall into that trap. And then, then the way is just slowly passed. And it kind of like life sometimes pulls us, carries us away by the stream. And then we can sometimes get stuck. And what happened to the viceroy here is that moment came, and he actually wasn't strong enough in his so-called yearning, because even though whatever he'd done for the past year, all those deserts and fields and forests that he had, we discussed the ideas of Avodas Hashem, something was amiss there. Rabbi Nosson says it's very, very important, it's of primary importance that a person establishes a very, very strong, stable place. That place we discussed, that makom, that place of feeling at home, feeling at one, feeling complete in doing the right son of Hashem. It's only when we're very strong in that place that no matter what life is going to bring us, we're going to be able to withstand that. And this can happen, when a boy finishes yeshiva and maybe goes into a workforce, or, a girl finishes SEM, or a person who's been in college their whole lives at some stage goes out to work. And even us, when we leave our home is our safe, sacred place. We know our place there. We don't have the temptations of the street. I mean, I travel a lot on buses in Eretz Israel, and even from LA to Bnei Brak, which are two very, almost very Haredi cities. And on the bus, sitting next to me or behind me or in front of me, you can see things which I wouldn't believe I would have seen. And you're not looking at them, they're just in front of you. So how do we are we strong enough to actually just keep our minds like focused on something where everything around us may be saying something else? And this is a very difficult thing to really think about, because it's a very deep idea. There's a certain kind of subtleness here. We have to know that, even though some things may be forbidden and some things may be permissible, but even things that are permissible, there's a different spirit involved here. Because the spirit of the princess that we're trying to free is not the six sons. The six sons, as you remember, we discussed was about achievement and materialistic quantitative things that can be seen and touched. And so freeing the princess is not just about keeping, the do's and the don'ts. It's really about something so much deeper. It's about this spiritual intuition, a sensitivity that the heart of every Jew has. And this is something which is very, very precious. And it's always there. It's always there. We have to kind of sometimes step out of that place of, what we've learned, and just in terms of the dry halacha, and see even above this, is what I'm doing or what I'm about to do, is this bringing me closer to Hashem? Is this increasing Hashem's kavod, his glory? Are we radiating more of Hashem's light into the world by this action? And if not, then we have to think twice, right? But we have to get to that point of sensitivity. And that point of sensitivity is something which takes a lot of personal prayer, a lot of work, a lot of thought, a lot of learning. How do we get to that point of being so in touch with ourselves that we can understand where that sensitivity is coming from? So if you remember, we discussed in chapter 5, when the viceroy takes the path to the side, the shvil matzad. When he takes that path to the side, we discussed this is about finding yourself within Yiddishkeit, individualizing your Yiddishkeit. That means that even though, we're in a school, we're in a community, or whatever we're doing, we all have to keep the same mitzvahs, we all have to be davening at the same time, the same kashrut, Shabbos, whatever it is. But there's a place to find ourselves within Yiddishkeit, which is connected to the root of our neshama, the root of our soul. And when we connect to that place, then all our life, all our avodas Hashem, and all our general, so-called mundane activities can be connected to that fire which we feel inside. But if we haven't established that fire, and we haven't established a personal connection with Hashem, in yearning for Hashem and wanting to be close to Hashem, then, when things around us kind of, confuse us, and we have temptations or challenges, so we're not strong enough in that place anymore, because it hasn't really been developed, even though we may be keeping all the halachas exactly according to Shulchan Aruch, but something deeper is missing. And that is the princess. Because if the viceroy was out to save the six sons, so then there would have been no problem, looking at the fruit, because it's not forbidden. The princess didn't say you can't look at the fruit, so he looked at the food, and then he desired it. But because we're dealing with something so subtle and so sensitive, we're dealing with the spirit of the princess. The viceroy is out to redeem the princess. We are to discover the princess within ourselves. It requires a very deep, subtle intuition of what our heart desires. And here I'd like to read the 14th principle in the Lost Princess Principles course, as by Rabbi Yaakov Planai. A pure Jewish heart can sense the true will of Hashem. The Jewish heart is naturally filled with an intuitive sense for the true desire of Hashem in a given situation. Let's repeat that. A pure Jewish heart can sense the true will of Hashem. So what this means really, the Meir Shalach brings a beautiful teaching in the Ishbitzer Rebbe, in his Sefer the Meir Shalach. He brings this beautiful teaching, which says that on Shavuot, when we receive the Torah, we receive something else as well. We receive a spiritual connection, a spiritual intuition to understand the ratzon of Hashem at any given moment. And this is called Bina, intuition. Now, Bina, intuition, is represented by the moon. We know that the moon doesn't have a light of its own. The moon reflects the light of the sun. And the sun is referring to Chokhmah. And the sun's light is very six suns, as we discussed, about achievement and goals and quantitativeness. And that is the area of the 613 mitzvot, the Chokhmah. We need to keep the 613 mitzvot, okay? Because without the sun, the moon has no light. We cannot only have individualized Yiddishkeit without keeping, the 613 mitzvot. That's a given. That's the first place, is to first start with the 613 mitzvot, and then we can add the spirit of the princess. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring the princess into our lives, to be in touch with that inner part of ourselves, which knows what Hashem wants at any moment. So going back to the story, the viceroy had to, we discussed this in great depth, the idea of emulative extraction. He had to be able to tap into that spirit of the princess in order to reclaim it, to recapture it from the place of the no good. And then he can redirect it to a place of kedusha, that place of holiness, that place of spiritual security and stability. Remember when we discussed the idea of the feeling of home when you come back from a hotel? We need to remember that feeling of home wherever we are in the world. So wherever we are and whatever we're doing, when we remember that place, that makom, we feel that stability again and we feel strong and we remember what are we here for. Remember the whole tachlis of our life. We remember why we're living. And remember why we're achieving these physical and spiritual achievements in the 6 suns. It's only really because of the princess. As we discussed, if there was no Shabbos, the 6 days would be nothing. It would just be another day, another day, another day. It's the Shabbos that gives meaning to everything else. And that is, we're speaking about these ideas, the spiritual energy of the princess. And the viceroy really, he failed this. And it's sad, right? Because he put in so much effort. You can just imagine, the excitement and the yearning, everything he went through for a long, long time. But at a moment, he really lost everything. And how can we work on this in a very real way that will have that strength at that moment? So when we think of this place, that makom, that should give us that feeling of connection to Hashem. If we can imagine, also it writes, when Avraham Avinu is taking Yitzchak, and he's on the way to Akedah Yitzchak, and we can imagine what he might have been experiencing in his mind. This is his son, which he waited so many years for, and now he has to go and sacrifice him. And on the way, he lifts up his eyes, and Hashem shows him the makom. And where does Hashem show him this makom? This makom, firstly, is that place of Akedah Yitzchak, and that's the place where the Beis HaMikdash was built. And that's what he sees. And where does he see it from? Afar, mirachok. Because when we feel a certain lack, we can yearn and remember to connect back to that. The second, the viceroy was so full of himself and was so sure that he's already there, basically. He just has to, take a few steps. So that's really when he fell, because he became detached from that makom. And Rabbi Nosson teaches it's very, very important to keep on encouraging ourselves to be very, very firm in that makom. How do we establish that makom so well? As we discussed, by individualizing our Yiddishkeit. If it's a certain mitzvah which really appeals to you, so learn everything about that mitzvah. That mitzvah should be your thing, that thing which, people think of you, they think of that mitzvah. If it's hachnosas ochim, if it's a gemach, whatever speaks to you. If it's a certain sefer or certain derech or certain teacher, a spiritual teacher, a mentor that you feel connected, that you feel that they speak your language, attach yourself to that teacher, ask questions, delve deeper, go in as much as you can, because we can never be strong enough. We never know what life's going to bring us. We have to strengthen ourselves very, very greatly. Rabbi Nachman and Rabbi Nosson both speak about this. And this really will bring us to that place that whatever happens afterwards, we will be able to really withstand that. And when we connect to that path, that intuition that we spoke about, then we can see what does Hashem really want from us at this point. It's not just about the 630 mitzvot, because some things can be forbidden and some things can be permissible at different times. And Rav Klein brings an example from Gemara Soite, which says Chassid Shoite. There's a certain story about a Chassid who, very big Talmid Chacham, very learned, very, very frum, very just all, everything he's supposed to do. And he's walking along the way, and a woman is drowning in the river. And this chassid, he won't stop to help the woman because, you can't speak to a woman, you can't help her, you can't touch her, how's he going to save her? So he continues. It's like the idea that, a person, we learn about Shabbos and how we have to be Mesiras Nefesh for Shabbos, and it's so important and everything. But if there's a slightest chance that someone needs to be Machal Shabbos to save a soul, if, for example, in an ad we have this a lot, sometimes children go missing on Shabbos, and if it's a young child and it's many hours, or a special needs child, the whole city is in cars, there's helicopters, everyone's searching. Because even the slightest chance of saving a life, we have to be Mechalel Shabbos. So we have to use that spiritual intuition to know at that moment, what does Hashem want from me right now? What does Hashem expect of me? What is, how in my actions can I show the world who Hashem is and radiate the light that I reflect of Hashem into the world? And this is really the part where the viceroy, he obviously wasn't stable enough in that area. And if we had to think about other stories which try and teach you how to get to that point, it would probably be the end of the sefer. So, you only learn how to get there. And if you don't get there, if you fail, what happens? And if we think of it, if our story ended here, the viceroy failed, he fell into a very, very deep sleep, it would be so sad. We would be like so frustrated and so disappointed, like a waste of reading the story. Like what happened? He just fell asleep, and that, what happened to all that yearning? What happened about when he did overcome the Yetzer Hara? If you remember when he when he sees the palace from afar and he sees all these guards and it looks like such a scary place and there's no ways he's going to get in, and he conquers that. He does his boyeros, he goes through that conversation with Hashem and he goes for it and he succeeds. But here he didn't succeed because he detached himself from that makom. So that place, and being able to really continue using that place with that spiritual sensitivity, trying to understand what does Hashem want from me right now. And the famous story, which I'm sure many of you know, is a story of Reb Zusha and Reb Melech, and they're thrown into a prison cell. It's one of my favorite stories for many, many different reasons. But so basically, they're in this prison cell and they don't have a restroom. And they have this open pail, which is the restroom. And that's what they use as a restroom. And obviously, within, a few hours or however long it is, this pail has a bad odor. And Rav Melech is like beside himself, and he says, we have to say Kriyat Shema, but we can't daven here. There's a bad smell. Like he's just like crying. He's like beside himself. And Rav Zusha starts smiling, and he's so excited. And he reminds him of halacha that if a person is in a place with a bad odor and they prevent it from saying Kriyat Shema, then they have to yearn to say Kriyat Shema. And he said, we have the ability now to yearn to say Kriyat Shema. I never thought I'd have this opportunity. And he gets up and he starts dancing, and he's so full of simcha at this opportunity to actually, be in this cell with this pail, and he can't daven and they can't learn, two holy men together, what they're going to be doing. They're going to be learning, discussing the Torah, davening, obviously. And here they are, and there's a smelling pail. And they're dancing around, and Rav Melech joins in with Reb Zusha, and they're dancing, and they're so excited about this pail. And the prison warden is very, very angry about this. He comes and he says, what's going on here? And he sees them, and they're busy dancing, and they're in their element, and they're pointing at this stinky pail, right? And he says, if that pail is giving them so much excitement and happiness, I'm going to take away the pail. And he takes the pail away. And obviously, then they can get back to their Avodas Hashem. Okay, this example maybe is not practical because it wasn't really their choice. But at that moment, they knew, they can't daven, but they can yearn to. Because remember, we learned that the yearning, that holy desire, is really what it's all about. That yearning is what Hashem wants from us. The expression of that, or the measurement of that yearning, is the mitzvah. But the yearning is where everything starts. And that's what they did. And these ideas are just to show it's not really about the black and white halacha. It's about above that. How do we sanctify ourselves 100% to really be what Hashem wants us to be, to be able to see and really, connect to that intuition. And Rav Nachman is teaching such a deep concept here that, even though things can be permissible for us, we have to think above that and connect to ourselves. And may these teachings be a source for everyone, in the Ukraine, and all the Jews, no harm should come to them. And Rav Nachman's holy kever until, Emet Hashem, he'll be born alive, and we'll be able to hear him teaching us these teachings. May it be B'Her B'Ameinu. But so just to remember that, we have to be so strong in these ideas of having our stability, of knowing what it is that we hear at every moment, not to be sure of ourselves. Rav Yaakov brings another example of like a reed. A reed is planted very firmly in the ground. And sometimes, it gets swayed. A very strong wind comes and it may go from left to right and it may sway around a bit. But at the end, it's going to just stay there. It's going to go back up to its position. It doesn't get, displanted from the ground. Whereas a very strong cedar tree with a very thick bark, if the wind, blows in a certain way, can crack the bark. And that strong tree, which was so full of itself and so strong, can actually, just actually collapse. So we have to remember who we are and what we are for, and to be very, very, very vigilant, because those last few hours, and we never know when we are about to reach that next spiritual level. Don't forget, we're not really reading a story. We're in the story. This is a story of our lives, of my life, of your life. Where does this find you? Where does it resonate with you? These are ideas that you can really think about during our day and bring it into practical applications, different moments you can think about. What does Hashem want for me to do right now? Like, what should I be doing? Not that, okay, we're not the basis of thinking, am I going to break Shabbos or not break Shabbos? But how can I make my Shabbos a Shabbos? By not speaking these words, which maybe I thought about what I need to buy, or, making plans for Yom Chol on Shabbos. Whatever it may be, at any moment, we have that ability because Hashem has given that to us. and it's a gift, and we should be so grateful for that. And may we all be zoicha to really utilize these gifts that Hashem gave us, and it gives us, continuously gives us, every day, to really come closer to Him, to recapture the spirit of the princess, and to come close to Hashem, and that everything we do is really for Him, not for us, to take the ego out of that place, to be so connected to our mission, to really serve Hashem, to cleave to Hashem, to yearn to Hashem, and to yearn for Hashem's glory to be fully revealed in the world. Emet Hashem b'mehera b'yameinu.
Amen. Leah, that's so beautiful. And thank you so much for giving over these beautiful gems each week about the lost princess. And thank you for putting in front of us right now to start our day with that, and go into, or some of us later in the day, with that avoda of our yearning and asking ourselves, is what I'm doing bringing me closer to Hashem? And is it bringing Hashem's glory into the world? Thank you so much. Before I ask if anybody has a question, I just wanted to say to everybody that this morning, Ellen wanted to share something with us, and Nomi wanted to share something with us, if everybody can stay on for a few more minutes. So first, does anybody have any questions for Leah or any comment?
Yes, I do. This is Charlene speaking. Thank you, Leah. I was just thinking of the word makom. I don't know, I have this obsession about the Hebrew language. And so makom to me is a contraction of asking ma, the question, the what am I here for? And then to get up and to stand up into my conviction.
Wow.
So that I go to the right place. And makom to me is a place of sometimes you can get lost. You can, like the lost princess, but if you stop and you ground yourself with your feet and you ask yourself why, then Hashem will bless you to know what to do next. And yeah, you're right, black and white mitzvot is not black and white, it's all a matter of gray shades. So I know I've been personally struggling makom for a long time, but when I said makom merachok, that was very powerful for me, because if you don't lose the sight, you're going to be in the right place, in the right makom. That's the way I feel. But thank you.
That is so beautiful. I love that. You're saying that the words makom comes from ma and kum, the what and to gap. That's so beautiful. That's so very insightful. I'm going to write that down. Thank you. I love that. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for teaching us. Thank you.
You Sarah, maybe we should wait for Ellen for the end of the week. I think it's still too early.
Okay, great. Then Nomi, do you want to share?
I think because I think it's like more than a month in advance, and I think I think people will forget. You know what I'm saying? Like maybe people will forget within a short period of time.
Okay.
So I thought maybe we should introduce it. Ellen, are you there? Maybe we should introduce it maybe the beginning of next week, because then we're looking at the beginning of next week is what date?
It would be March
7th, 8th.
Because there is a questionnaire to fill out and a response.
Right. But that Ellen gives everybody about a month.
Okay. No, well, she wanted to sort through it. Okay, fine, good. No, whatever. Today I'm busy anyway. I have to run out, but anytime. And maybe Friday or Thursday, if it's possible, just to put the idea out there.
So maybe Ellen, Friday, when we don't have a speaker, maybe what you'll do is you'll just right after the tefillas, you'll bring out the idea of what we're going to be doing. Does that sound good?
Yes, very good. Thank you.
Okay.
Give me time to prepare it.
Okay, thanks, Ellen. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I don't know if anybody wants to stay on for 2 seconds. I read something on Shabbos that really I became extremely obsessed with. I've been reading it to everybody, and you don't have to stay on. But it was just something so profound. And when Hannah Deutsch spoke yesterday about the concept of marriage, it tied in so beautiful. It was written by Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson, and he basically said he heard it from the Rebbe. It was one of the last words that he heard from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and it was on the idea of the concept of oneness. And he brought it in this past parsha, which was all about the giving of the chetzi shekel. And I will give you just a synopsis of the beginning, because I'm not going to read the beginning, but I want to read the rest of it because it is just so beautiful that every time I read it, I just cry. So he said that he gives the whole thing. Why is it, as we all know, the question, why were we all supposed to give only half a shekel versus a full shekel, right? But the Torah says each half a shekel was 10 gerahs and a full shekel was 20 gerahs. And actually the Torah is telling us to give 20 gerahs, where a half a shekel is only 10 gerahs. He asked the question, I guess the Lubavitcher Rebbe asked the question, why was it that the Torah was asking us to give 20, where only a half, but at the other hand, it was telling us to give 10, to give a half a shekel. So he goes on to say that if you look at the building, the base of the Mishkan, it's a very, very interesting thing, that everything had to be full, complete, right? There wasn't allowed to be any mooms, anything that was at all, what the word in moom in English, I can't remember for a second. There wasn't supposed to, everything had to be complete. The Kohen Gadol couldn't have anything wrong with him. The animals had to be perfect. Everything had to be perfect. So I just want you to listen to this. It is just so exquisite. I'm telling you, we don't even begin to understand who we are. And we don't even begin to understand what this world is. And we don't even begin to understand our, like what it really is. It's like almost like we're living in this, and I don't say this with any criticism or judgment. I'm saying like the understanding of the ruchnius and the Shekhinah is, I don't even think we understand it on our fingernail. So he says here like this. So he said that why the 20 gerahs, right? Because really, one second. One second, let me just go to that page, 1 second. Okay, so he talks about that the Torah really wants us to be complete. He wants us to serve the Rabban Shalom in a complete way. So he goes like this. The truth is that the Torah desired every Jew to contribute a whole, not a half a shekel. That is why the Torah specifies the amount of a whole shekel and not the sum of a half shekel. The Torah wants every individual to contribute a complete, unflawed shekel. The question is, how do we define the individual contributor? Where do I end and where do you begin? Is man in his deepest place an isolated and lonely creature, struggling with a mysterious and complex self in a way that nobody else can understand or appreciate? Or is man in his most profound space, an integrated spirit interconnected to others? Many philosophical and spiritual disciples eloquently describe the solitariness you experience when you travel deeper into the self. The deeper you go, the lonelier you become. This is a compelling view, and it, of course, has a deep truth to it. In the words of Hillel in the Ethics of the Fathers, if I am not for myself, who will be here for me? Rabbi J.B. Soloveitchik wrote a famous work, The Lonely Man of Faith. Its main thesis that a life of faith is a life of profound existential loneliness. But there is still a deeper truth. The souls of all our people are essentially one, writes Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Le'adi, one of the greatest Jewish thinkers and mystics. In his Tanya, our bodies may appear distinct, our souls are one. When we cut through the external strata of the human personality and reach into the core, we discover not loneliness, but oneness. Attachment is the basic condition of every soul. Attachment between you and God, attachment between you and me, and attachment between us and the entire cosmos. The underlying fabric of existence is oneness. We are all part of that oneness. Each one of us embodying another frequency of the infinite light manifested and expressed through our unique body, mind, and soul. Of course, many of us suffer from attachment disorder. We feel insecure in our attachments. Our limbic brains go into isolation mode. But when I can embrace my true inner power, I can rediscover that I am not lonely. Like limbs of one body, we are all notes of a single composition. The founder of the Hasidic movement, the Baal Shem Tov, taught that if you feel lonely, you are stuck in the bubble encircling your soul. You haven't touched the sacred space of the soul itself. The moment you experience your soul, you experience oneness. The Tanya explains that this is the path to experience authentic love. The distinctions between you and I exist only when I am in touch exclusively with my insecure and timid animal consciousness. My inner animal can feel the need to detach, but when I can allow my inner divine consciousness to flow through my animal consciousness, there is infinite love. The soul loves to love. When I am living with my external and timid self, I may delude myself into thinking that I am complete. When I'm living with my deeper internal self, I recognize that in truth, I am a half, cherishing the opportunity to love and share because you and I are one. What is marriage? This is the essential to the Jewish understanding of marriage. Marriage too can be viewed in two ways. One way is to view marriage as bringing together two distinct individuals who choose to link their lives for mutual benefit and the dream of love. If it works, great. And if not, we move on. As a result, we have created in modern times what researchers call a culture of divorce. It is not that people get divorced. Divorce is sometimes necessary and even life-saving, and it is part of Torah legislation. It is rather that we often do not appreciate what marriage is and the work necessary to create a powerful marriage. Judaism views marriage as two halves of one whole reuniting. A Jewish marriage is not a union, but a reunion. God initially created woman and man as one entity and then divided them into two. God created man in his image, male and female, he created them, says the Torah. The sages explain that God created a single individual with two faces. Then he divided them into two distinct persons, man and woman. Why? Since God desired man and woman to be distinct people and genders, why did he create them as one and then separate them? Why did he not initially create them as separate people, just as he did with other mammals? The answer is because God wanted to demonstrate the truth that man and woman are essentially one. Even after they have been separated, they remain two halves of what is essentially a unified organism. Marriage is not a suspension of one's natural individual self for the sake of uniting with a stranger. Rather, in a good marriage, a woman and a man return to their deepest natural state, a unified and integrated being reflecting infinite oneness, each in his and her own unique way. Marriage, when perceived correctly, and when the husband and wife are ready to transcend trauma and begin to truly trust, allows a woman and a man to discover their full and complete unified self, a self that is comprised of masculine and feminine energy. That is so important for conflict resolution. It is not about the husband or the wife winning the argument. It is about discovering the ability for both of them to experience oneness. You don't come into a doctor's office with a hand infection and say, just amputate my hand and life will go on. Amputation is not an option, only a tragic necessity in extreme circumstances when life is at stake. Similarly, with divorce, while in some instances it is the right thing to do, we ought never to treat it lightly and consider it as part of our initial plans. Who are you? Now we can understand the nature of the strange mitzvah, instructing the Jewish people to contribute only a half a shekel. The Torah wants each of us to contribute a whole shekel. But if I were instructed to contribute a complete shekel on my own, that might rob me of my deepest truth, that I am attached to you. The Torah is attempting to teach us the secret of attachment. Together we are one because we are really one. For the real me to contribute a complete shekel, I must contribute a half a shekel, allowing my other half to contribute the second half. When you and I contribute each a half a shekel, each of us has indeed contributed a complete shekel. You and I are one.
That's beautiful, Naomi. Thank
Is
you.
that, isn't that, was that not,
Unbelievable. Maybe
was
you
that
can
not
put it
unbelievable?
in the chat so that we can print it also.
I can't, I don't have access. I print things, but then they disappear. But
Naomi,
I want to tell you that
Naomi,
it is-
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. And I hope I'm not being too alarmist, but Chaya Malka seems to have fallen asleep on her